What's going on, family? I'm Scrapbook Boxing, the Museum of the Forgotten Fisticuff series. I'm in the process of explaining to you my top 10 greatest fighters of all times. But I would like to introduce to you my number 4 greatest boxer of all times. And that's Henry Armstrong, Henry Medley Jackson, Hurricane Hank, Homicide Hank. He boxed from 1931 to 1945. I had the pleasure of meeting Henry Armstrong, spent a great deal of time with him. He expressed to me why he moved from the South to the West. Talked to me about his relationship with Archie Moore. Was truly introduced to the game by Al Gaynor. He was partially trained by Harry Wiley Sr., tried out for the 1932 Olympic Games. Henry Armstrong was born December 12, 1912 in St. Louis, Missouri. Some will mention Columbus, Mississippi. He died October 23, 1988 in Los Angeles, California. He was 75 years of age at the time of his arrest. Some will mention October 24th. Some will mention October 22nd. He stood 5 foot 5.5 inches, weighed 120 to 147 pounds. Had a record of 151 wins, 21 losses, 101 knockouts, and a total bout career of 181 contests. Now, he was trained by Al Savani and managed by Wirt Ross, as well as Eddie Meade and George Moore. Blackface actor Al Jolson and George Raff would buy each other's contract of Henry Armstrong. He had 22 total World Welterweight Championship bouts, 19 total World Welterweight Championship title defenses, 3 total undefeated World Championship titles, and he held them all simultaneously. But here's what's interesting about Henry Armstrong. 1937, he had a record of 27 wins, no losses, and 26 knockouts. The only fighter he did not knock out was Aldo Spaldi. But let's compare it with the fighter Edwin Valero. He had an amateur record of 86 wins, 6 losses, 57 knockouts. But when you look at Walker Smith, Ray Robinson, he had an amateur record of 86 wins, 64 by knockout, with 40 knockouts in the very first round, no losses. As a professional, he would have a record of 27 wins, no losses, with 27 knockouts. Took him 8 years to complete that. When you circle back to Henry Armstrong, he had a record of 27 wins, no losses, with 26 knockouts in 1937 alone. That's 1 year. And in that process, he fought world champions, 4 of them: Frankie Click, Mike Belois, Benny Bass, and Petey Cerrone. Henry Armstrong would have 14 wins, no losses, and 10 knockouts between December 1936 and September 1940. He was 59 wins, 1 loss, 1 draw, with 51 knockouts, defeating the very best of his day. As a featherweight, he had 107 bouts. He was world champion on October 29, 1937, as we mentioned, defeating Petey Cerrone. As a welterweight, he had 73 bouts. He was world welterweight champion May 31st, 1938, defeating Barney Ross. As a lightweight, he had 3 contests. August 17, 1938, he would defeat Lou Ambers for that title. He would defeat Petey Cerrone, New York's Madison Square Garden. And he had a record of 75 wins, 12 losses, 94 bouts combined. Henry Armstrong would score a 6-round knockout, winning the New York SAC in the vacant NBA featherweight championship title. The contest took place October 29, 1937. Now, how did he get the NBA featherweight championship title? Well, Mike Belois was stripped of his NBA featherweight championship title. And so that title would be at stake as soon as the bell would ring. So Peter Cerrone walked into the ring with the New York SAC Featherweight Championship title, but the NBA was vacant. So that would make Henry Armstrong the first Black American undisputed featherweight champion in boxing history. George Dixon was from Canada. He was a 3-time featherweight champion, defended his title 25 times. And Henry Armstrong was from America. Kid Chocolate was from Cuba, but he wasn't universally recognized as the world featherweight champion. Henry Armstrong was. He would defeat Barney Ross, New York Madison Square Garden Bowl. Ross had a record of 90 wins, 12 losses, 109 bouts. It would be a 15-round unanimous decision for the New York SAC and the NBA welterweight championship title. They would fight May 31st, 1938. But that wasn't it. Armstrong had the audacity, after he moved up from featherweight to welterweight, he would then move back down to the lightweight division. And he would defeat Lou Ambers, New York's Madison Square Garden, 15 rounds. The last 5 rounds, he would swallow his own blood, threatened by the referee that the contest would stop. Henry Armstrong would say to the referee, "Don't worry about it. I would not lose any more blood and saturate your canvas." That contest took place August 17th of 1938. Armstrong became the second Black boxer to become a lightweight world champion after Joe Gans. He was the third Black boxer to become a featherweight champion after George Dixon and Kid Chocolate. And he would become the 4th Black welterweight champion after the Barbados Demon Walcott, after Dixie Kid, after young Jack Thompson, and then himself, Henry Armstrong. Now, Pedro Martinez would be one of the fighters that Henry Armstrong would be in a ring with. These are all champions that I'm going to name to you. Benny Bass, 1938. Frankie Click. Mike Belois in 37. Frizzy Zivic in 40 and 41. Peter Cerrone in 37. Chalky Wright. Lou Ambers, 38-39. Sefrino Garcia. Bo Jack. Sammy Angot. Sugar Ray Robinson in 43. Tippy Larkin. Juan Zarita. Midget Wargas in 35. Lou Jenkins. Albert Baby Arizmenzi. Fought him 6 times. Won 3 and lost 3. Leo Roddick and Paul Jr. These were all champions. But he would take on fighters such as Luther Slugger White, who was a champion contender. Luther Slugger White would take on Sammy Angot for the NBA lightweight championship title. It was vacant. Armstrong would also take on Ralph Zanelli and Earl Turner. Davey Day would face Sammy Angot for a title. Armstrong would take on Aaron Perry and Aldy Spalding and Willie Joyce, Earl Turner, Bobby Manuel, Rodolfo Casanova, Perfecto Lopez, fought him several times. Davey Abad, Richie Fontaine, took on Chester Slider and Albany Davis, Reuben Shank, and Jimmy Garrison, Bobby Poncho, just to name a few. Between April 28th, 1933 and September 8th, 1935, he would take on Perfecto Lopez. 7 wins, 2 knockouts, 3 draws, fought him a total of 12 times. Between November 3rd, 1934 and January 10th of 1939, he would take on Alberto Baby Arizmenzi. 3 wins, 3 losses, 6 bouts combined. Between February 26, 1936 and October 20th of 1939, he would take on Richie Fontaine. 2 wins, 1 loss, a total of 3 bouts. Between October 4th, 1940 and October 26, 1942, he would take on Frizzy Zivic. 1 win and 2 losses, a total of 3 bouts. Between March 2nd, 1943 and August 21st, 1944, he would take on Willie Joyce, 2 wins, 2 losses, a total of 4 bouts. He was in the Boxing Hall of Fame, 1954, in the International Boxing Hall of Fame in 1990. Side note, some would mention he had 149 wins, 21 losses, and 101 knockouts. Some would mention his birthplace was at Columbus, Mississippi. So when you look at it, Henry Armstrong was champion more than 3 separate occasions. You see, he would win the Mexican and California featherweight championship title when he would defeat Baby Arizmendi. As I mentioned to you, he faced him 6 times. He won 3 and Arizmendi won 3. On August 4th, 1936, Henry Armstrong became the California Mexican featherweight champion when he would defeat Baby Arizmendi, Los Angeles, California, via 10-round decision. It was at Wrigley's Field. It would be his 64th professional bout. Baby Arizmendi of Mexico City would become the California World Featherweight Champion. On October 18th of 1932, he would defeat Russian's Empire Newsboy Brown, Los Angeles, California, in front of 7,000 spectators. Arizmendi would bounce back. He would win the crown and defeating Newsboy Brown. He would take on Freddie Miller and Armstrong and many great fighters of his day. Baby Arizmendi, who was he? His name was Alberto Baby Arizmendi. He stood 5 foot 4.5 inches. He was a Mexican featherweight with a record of 138 total bouts, 93 wins, 20 knockouts, 27 losses, and 17 draws. He had 1 no contest. He was an orthodox boxer. He was world California Mexican champion, October 18th of 1932, and the world New York SAC champion, August 30th, 1934, when he would take on Mike Belois. Henry Armstrong defeats Alton Black. Very important fight during that time, September 13th, 1935, at the Chestnut Arena in Reno, Nevada. And he would win the Western Featherweight Championship title. It was before it was called the California Featherweight Championship crown. Alton Black, his name was Alton Wiley Black. He was a southpaw, stood 5 foot 5 inches, and fought from 1932 to 1937. Had 208 rounds of boxing under his belt, 33 professional bouts, weighed 126 pounds. He was born in Fort Lewton, Colorado, lived in Reno, Nevada. 218 rounds, fought from 1932 to 37. And he took on fighters such as Henry Armstrong. Fought him twice, in fact, September 13th, 1935. What a fighter he was. October 29th of 1937, California Mexican featherweight champion. Henry Armstrong would become the NBA New York SAC featherweight champion and the first Black American world featherweight championship when he would defeat Petey Cerrone. Fought him at New York's Madison Square Garden, making him the second Black fighter to win a title behind Theodore Tiger Flowers in New York's Madison Square Garden. I want you to pay attention to the accolades of Henry Armstrong. Think of the time in which he came, the racism that he had to overcome. Certain arenas he couldn't step foot in. He had to shadow box and prepare himself in mop closets. He couldn't change in certain dressing rooms in certain states. I want you to think of the mind frame that Henry Armstrong was under, the pressure he was under. Couldn't eat in certain restaurants. I want you to think about all those things as he's accomplishing what he's accomplishing during his time. February 26, 1926, the first Black world middleweight champion, Theodore Tiger Flowers, would defeat the Pittsburgh windmill Harry Greb. On May 31st, 1938, the fourth Black world welterweight champion defeats world 2-division champion Chicago's Barney Ross, 15 rounds on New York's Madison Square Garden Bowl. Barney Ross was originally from New York. At the age of 5, his family would move him over to Chicago. And unfortunately for Barney Ross, his dad tried to open up a little candy shop. He borrowed money from the mob. Later on his payments, the mob didn't care about that. They shot him in cold blood in his store. August 17th, 1938. The second black world lightweight champion defeats world champion Hickenmeyer Hurricane Lou Ambers in 15 rounds in New York's Madison Square Garden. Lou Ambers. The referee was Billy Kavanagh. He raises the hand of Henry Armstrong, scoring about 8 rounds to Armstrong, 6 for Ambers, 1 round even. Lightweight contender Henry Armstrong was deducted 4 rounds for alleged low blows. He was given the arm bombs. Armstrong was probably the greatest fighter in the 1937 era, outside of Joe Louis. What was interesting about Henry Armstrong was that him and Joe Louis, both black fighters, would cover the featherweight up until the heavyweight in 1937. In 1938, as Armstrong collected all 3 belts combined, the black fighters were the most successful in that year. Armstrong had the featherweight, the lightweight, and the welterweight championship covered. Joe Louis had the heavyweight championship covered. John Henry Lewis had the light heavyweight championship covered. What a time. And that's part of the criteria. The time in which a man came. Who was in his era? Who did he face? What champions were surrounding him in every weight division? And you couldn't ask for better than Henry Armstrong. I'm Scrapbook Boxing, the museum of the forgotten fisticuff series, stating all great fights and all great fighters would never be forgotten on my channel. Listen out for number 5 and beyond. Thanks for watching. Be well.